Previously on agentpalmer.com, RockDoc shows that just maybe Simple Plan can be perfect. Eruption did not ignite a fire in my Crichton-loving heart, and Chris and I have moved on to a few smaller projects, but we still talk about some of the larger ones. This is the Palmer Files, episode 160, with B P Kelso, who is, among many things, an engineer by trade, a scriptwriter, an author, and a dad. We discuss storytelling, adaptation, reading, always learning, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 160th episode is B P Kelso. Brendan, as he is also known in some circles, is a storyteller. He's adapted Shakespeare, Greek tragedies, and classic literature for young performers, be it the classroom or a camp. He's also just released his first novel, more to come as you'll hear, called The Night She Said Hatchet. An Alzheimer's mom utters a cryptic word that unearths a cold case thriller her son must solve. As for what you're about to hear in this episode, it's his origin story, how he got into adapting the classics, writing his novel, reading, and the need for filling the many buckets that make up who we are. Plus, being brief, using your real name, and just how important is storytelling in any industry. All that and more is coming your way shortly. But first, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterward, you can find all related ways to contact Brendan and myself in the show notes. The Night She Said Hatchet can be found on his website, bpkelso.com, and his library of melodramatic scripts for kids can be found at playingwithplays.com. Don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's lift the curtain and get on with the show. Brendan, we were talking about names before we started recording because as you write things and publish certain things, you go by certain names. And as a guy who publishes stuff on the internet, that for the longest time was Agent Palmer. It's not until I launched this podcast that anything really has Jason Stershik, like my real name on it. I want to ask the first question, which is not why, depending on what you write, you change your name, but why'd you use your real name? Asking as a guy who decided not to.
No, I started writing like 20 years ago. I didn't really think about it. Didn't think much was going to come of it. And so I just used my name and just kind of went with it. And I've always loved it's kind of a love-hate relationship. I hated my name when I was a kid.
I think we all do, right?
As Brendan, I was always Brenda. And I never, I got in so many schoolyard fisticuffs that I just didn't like it. And then somehow I just started leaning into it around 14 or 15. And then I just started working on my signature, like what would BPK, and like I had this flow and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make this name something someday. And so, I kind of stuck with it and, I kind of made a deal with myself. And so here I am. Okay.
And so it's Brendan when? Like what's the delineation? When's it Brendan? When's it BP?
Okay, Brendan is, I'm just Brendan, but Brendan P. Kelso is, I write Shakespeare for kids scripts, Greeks, classics for scripts for kids. Sorry, it's early, so my words aren't exactly coming out straight.
You're good.
But the main thing is they're scripts for kids. I've got 47 of them now, and that's just what I've always been. That's been the author name for that.
Okay.
But then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, basically every theater in the world shut down.
Yep.
And when every theater in the world shuts down and you're a playwright, your business goes from here to here and very quick. And so my buddy, Kenny, he looked at me, he said, well, he didn't look at me. He's in Florida. He's like, hey, you could write a novel. You've talked about it a couple times. He's like, it's still storytelling. I'm like, it's a different type of storytelling. I'm not sure. So I just wrote down, I had a kind of a concept of this kind of spy thriller in my head. So I wrote down a couple chapters and read them to my wife, and we're like, wow, I'm actually not too bad at this. I'm like, so I kept going with it, and then eventually I finally come a few months here, I will, or when you hear this, it's been out. So I have a my brand new debut novel. I've been in the writing world for 20 years.
Yeah.
But writing scripts, and I have a complete, database of teachers and educators I literally work with around the world. But this is a different beast
Okay,
because,
so there are a lot of questions. So I feel like we'll start with the hardest one first, which is they are different. They are still, your friend's right. Storytelling is storytelling, but they are different beasts. Having done it now, like on the other side of the looking glass, like, do you go back and go like, well, I didn't have the time until COVID, because obviously you had a little more time, but is this something like, oh, okay, this is opened a new door. So now this is the first of many. I'm going to try and make time to write more of this, this kind of storytelling.
No, absolutely. I just love writing in general. I love writing scripts for kids because when I get feedback or I see kids perform my plays, there's nothing cooler than seeing you open the doorway to kids to both love theater and drama as well as Shakespeare and Greeks.
The
when
classics.
they're out there and they're
Yeah.
playing Hamlet or they're playing Odysseus or whoever. It's really cool just to see them get into it, and they feel like they own that character for life. And but when writing a novel and telling the story and kind of getting in somebody's head and kind of weaving it a different way, it's a different kind of high in a sense. And somebody asked me a few weeks ago and they said, hey, what do you like to do as a hobby? I'm like, I like to write.
Okay.
They're like, but that's your job. I'm like, I know, I love my job.
Yeah, that's
Isn't this
good.
cool? I wish we all had this problem, but it was just, it's so cool. I mean, I've already written 1, 2, 3 other books. They're all kind of like in the back queue right now.
Okay.
And part of the logic at the beginning was I wanted to have kind of a queue so that I would launch them every few months just to get kind of like that algorithm kind of flow thing for like Amazon. But then I started realizing, I'm like, life's short. Who knows what's going to happen? I love this story that I wrote because it's very meaningful because it's about my mom and I. But it quickly turns to a fictional thriller. But a lot of it was cathartic in the beginning, therapeutic in the sense of just how it starts off.
Yeah.
But the other stories, they're, one of them's going out to my beta readers in the next month. And that's a horror thriller, which I don't even read horror, but it kind of came out because I was reading Stephen King's book, on writing.
Yep.
And, the whole logic in my head was, what if Stephen King, we consider him the greatest horror writer. What if he actually only was so good because he was possessed by a demon? And then my mind just kind of started spinning. And the next thing you know, I could not get this thing out of my head. I was writing a different story and I'm like, okay, I have to get this out.
Yeah.
So I wrote it and then I got back to writing my other story because it was just so there. It was so like alive in my head.
All right. So
it's just fun.
We have to go back because I know it's on your website, but for people that are just finding out about you now, how did you get into adapting the classics for children? Because that is not like, first of all, full disclosure, I never thought about you in the royal sense. Like I always thought like, oh, these plays were written many long centuries ago, and then we just put them on. Like I never thought like, oh, somebody has to adapt this, or like somebody has to modernize it, or like just. And look, I was in theater. I mean, I was more stage, but or behind and crew, but like I never thought about it. So educate me. First of all, how'd you get into it, and what's it like to adapt?
I got into it because I was fiddling around with this Hamlet script, and this was like 20 something years ago. And my wife was teaching middle school at the time, and she's like, "Hey, I got these middle school kids. I need to do something with them. Hey, can you play with that Hamlet script with them?" So I said, "Sure." We had fun with it. And then next thing you know, my son was born. And I'm an engineer by degree, by the way. I'm not, English was, I don't even know, English is my first language, but my teachers would probably disagree.
Okay.
And it was more of a love-hate relationship with English for a long time. But then I just still loved writing. I just
Okay.
loved getting the thoughts out.
Yep.
So, practice makes perfect, and still not perfect, but practice. So I go in and I write it, and then my son's born. So I just quit the job because I'm an engineer by degree, and I did not care about what I did. And my ADD always needs things curious and working, and I'm a problem solver. So I love engineering in that aspect. So I just took a step back and decided to just watch my son be the stay-at-home dad.
Sure.
But at that time, 21 years ago now, it was let's see how many movies I can watch. He's asleep most of the day.
Yeah. Okay.
And then my wife comes home and she encourages me. She's like, let's try to make a little money here. And so she helped sign me up to the Parks and Rec just to do this Hamlet. I called it Hamlet in a Can then. And I did it with the kids, and she's like a savant when it comes to running camps. So she coached me through it all, and I did it with the kids, and the kids loved it. And the kids literally came up to me and they were like, what are we doing next? What are we doing next? I'm like, Midsummer. And then I literally went home that weekend, wrote it, and we did it the next week. But at the same time, this homeschool mom came and watched our Hamlet, and she said, this was fantastic. She said, you're coming up north and you're doing this with my kids. I said, well, you're kind of 20 miles away. I don't know. She's like, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. I'm like, so I started doing it with them. And next thing it was Romeo and Juliet and the Macbeth, Caesar. And then I actually had to get a real job because this, although fun and although like I was getting paid some money for it, just, it was not doing what I needed to do financially. So it kind of went to the back of my mind. And that was in 2003, between 2003 and 2005, somewhere in that zone. And then went to work. I worked at a company called Slime. We made tire sealant, and it was very mom and pop, and it was a blast, but it was very entrepreneurial and very marketing driven. So I was in charge of product development and R&D, and I learned so much about marketing from that perspective, just a different way to do business. And my mind, I was like, okay, I still had this Hamlet Shakespeare thing. But what I realized in teaching the two classes, both the homeschool and the one I did, is, the homeschool class, I had like 7 kids, but the Parks and Rec one, I had 14. I'm like, how do I make one script? Because scripts always have like 9 kids or 9 people and 9 actors. I'm like, how do I make it so it works for both? I'm like, wait a minute. I made it work from 14 down to 7. How about if I somehow make this thing flexible so any teacher could do it? It's an after school program. And so I came up with this concept. If you open up any of my books, you're going to look at it and you're going to see there's 3 plays in each book. And one's for a small group, medium group, and a big group.
Okay.
And the big group has like most of the characters you'll find in whatever story it is.
Yeah.
The small one, I'm like getting rid of characters and we're just making it work. But then I tell you who you can double up. So a lot of them, you can do it between like 7 kids up to like 20 kids. And if you have any number in there, I've got a script that'll work for you. But that was my model.
Yeah.
And so publish on demand, Kindle really wasn't a thing yet, but publish on demand was. And so print on demand. And so I did that for the first one. The longest thing it took was 2 years just to get the right cover, because it took me a long time to really, I'm kind of anal about my product because I looked at it as a product.
Okay.
I'm like, what does it look like? What's the message? It's got to say the right thing. And then, of course, I have none around here to show you. Why would I? So I did that. I said, okay, I'm going to launch it. And if it takes off, then I'll write the next one. Okay. And I remember one day, like 3 months later, I'm going and checking my sales on my phone. And I was sitting in front of a Starbucks, and next thing you know, it's at 75 units. And I'd been selling 1 or 2 here and there, but then suddenly 75. And it really hit me that in one shot, I'm assuming school bought 75. They spent $750 for my books. Like, holy cow, people really actually pay and like this. And then from there, it just kind of snowballed. It was a hobby,
Yeah.
for between 2008 and 2015. It was like I just kept launching like one, maybe two a year.
Okay.
And then in 2015, I kind of had enough momentum. We were talking about adopting. Um, and so my wife's like, I'm not doing this by myself. And I'm like, all right, let me give it a shot. So in
Yeah.
2015, I left corporate because by then we weren't mom and pop, we were corporate. And that was starting to kind of rub me the wrong way. And then went to, just started doing this. And then I started pumping out like 3 or 4 a year and teaching it as after school programs, in schools, doing my own summer camps, tons of different ways. And to answer the last part of your question, do I enjoy it? I love it.
Yeah.
I love, especially in the scripts, because the scripts are smaller. My plays are like about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on which one, how you're doing it. But it's like, I love nuancing each line to try to get the right feel, the right texture, the right humor, everything in there, because my plays are melodramatic.
Okay.
And the tragedies are funnier than the comedies, especially when we talk Shakespeare, because kids love to melodramatically die on stage. I mean, they just love to get out there and just fall over.
Time to ham it up.
And
Yep.
literally, and they love it. And once I did that, I kind of leaned into it. My auditions, I'm like, give me your best death. And the kids will all line up and they'll just boom, boom, boom. And it's funny. I can see who the hams are. I can see, who's a little more shy, and then I cast accordingly.
So I want to go back before I go forward. Why were you messing around with Hamlet to begin with? I mean, it all starts because you're messing around with Hamlet. Like what possessed you to be like, I think I'm going to play around with this?
You know what? In high school, I hated Shakespeare.
Okay.
English, again, was not my thing. And 90, if you still ask today, 95% of kids hate Shakespeare.
That's probably, yeah.
You ask adults, and adults still today would be like, I don't understand him. They don't. My brother-in-law came over and he read in one sitting, which took maybe an hour for him. He read Macbeth, Caesar, and Hamlet, just one of my versions.
Yep.
And he's like, I finally understand what the story is. And I'm like, yeah. And when you really understand Hamlet's a great story. I mean, all of the Shakespeare stories, they're great stories. And they're great characters. I mean, the guy, kind of had a gift for writing.
A little bit.
Yeah, just a touch. But it's such a great story. So I just said, why don't I make it so that I can understand it? And just, so I just started just fiddling with it, and playing. And like I said, I like to write. And in my mind, writing a play was easier than writing because you're doing just lines and just words. And then you as an actor are paying. I always tell teachers, I said, I only am half of the art project. I write the script.
Yeah.
You, the director, and you, the actors, you layer in all the other color in there and you make it happen. So that's why it's, I'm tangenting a little, but that's like for my scripts, I'm never verbatim on the scripts with the teachers and stuff because the kids it's first of all, theater should be about creativity and learning how to be creative. And you can only do that if you don't have shackles holding you to a certain way to do things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they follow the script just by nature. But if lots of times kids will be like, hey, can I do this? What about that? I had a kid once. It's funny. We were doing Jungle Book. And in my Jungle Book, there's a line and it says, hey, Mowgli, Shere Khan's waiting for you down at the ravine. And all the kids that I was reading it with, they started giggling. And I'm like, I've done this like 4 different times. Why are they giggling? So we read it again and they just kind of giggled again. I'm like, all right, stop. Why are you guys laughing? What's funny? What am I missing?
Yeah.
And they said, well, the ravine. And what I didn't click in my head is in our little county, San Luis Obispo, we have a water park called the Ravine.
Okay.
And so in their mind, they saw Shere Khan on a floaty going down a water slide.
Yep.
Now, that context would not fly anywhere else, but in our county, in our audience, flies perfect. I ran with it. I'm like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And so next thing you know, in the actual play, Shere Khan walks out in a big pink flamingo floaty.
Oh, nice.
And Mowgli's like, dude, you're still in your floaty. Oh, sorry. Runs, throws it backstage, comes out. But that was the creative nature. I mean, it made it their own.
Yeah.
So this is something they will never forget. They'll carry that on. They'll also know that, hey, my ideas are good. I can run with them. And half of that's building confidence in kids. So
yeah, I immediately think of, and it's not just Shakespeare, but I think of like classics, meaning things we were forced to read in middle and high school. And I go, well, you know, there's 10 Things I Hate About You. There's Clueless. You know, there are, and I know for my generation specifically that specific Romeo and Juliet is held in high regard because of the music and not because of the content. But 10 Things I Hate About You and Clueless are just good stories that are based on classics that, again, when you talk about people not getting Shakespeare, and I think a lot of people don't know those are based on classics, right? And so there is a lack of, look, not everybody's a movie buff. Not everybody cares where things come from or what they're based on, but it's odd to me that in 2001, Fellowship of the Ring comes out and everybody knows it's based on a book. But prior to that, in the previous decade, Clueless comes out, nobody knows it's based on, you know, like 10 Things I Hate About You, nobody knows that's Taming of the Shrew. Like, there are just these gaps from the written word to movies that, or plays in general, that seem astounding to me. Because I grew up with Tolkien, so I thought everybody, like, I just assumed everybody knew. So when people discovering, like, oh, this is a book, like that, I was like, you didn't read this? Like, what? Like, there, and I know everybody's circle's different, but just generally how we got to a point where, like, no, Clueless is based on something. It's not wholly unique to itself. It's updated, it's modernized, it's in the 90s, but it's not its own thing. And
right.
So
but it has the bones. It has the story bones in it.
Yep.
It's funny. I go into schools all the time, and when I talk to kids, I'm like, how many of you really know the story of Hamlet? I may get one or two kids raise their hand. These are 6th graders, 5th graders, whatever.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, how many of you guys know the Lion King?
Yep.
Oh, I'm like, yeah, you know Hamlet.
Yeah.
What? Like, you do. And then
Yeah.
I explain it really quick, and they're like, oh, you know, so.
There's a very big kind of important, I guess this goes back to storytelling, right? Like, it is kind of universal. So, all right, if you were an engineer by trade and that's what you went to school for, and you were kind of, you know, science track, I would guess, was the love for writing just a hobby in the background, or was this a late blooming discovery? Like,
totally late blooming. Totally. And it's weird because I've always had a difficult time reading. Part of that's the dyslexia, but I don't really deal with dyslexia anymore. But just comprehension for me was really difficult for a long time. And I think I was 21. I came home from college. And when I got home, my parents were gone on vacation, whatever. I was just bored. And they had some paperbacks on the shelf. And one of them was Patriot Games by Tom Clancy.
Okay.
So I'm like, you know, and I don't know. I've always tried to read, and it just always just failed for me. But then I just decided to pick it up, and like in the first chapter, like hooked me. Like, you know, I've never been hooked like that. I'm like, okay. What? And I burned through that thing like in a week. Then I'm like, what's the next Clancy? You know, where's he going? And so I read the next one, and literally over that summer, I was like, each week, boom, boom, boom. And I think up till like some of All Fears or something like that, because that was the last one he wrote at that time.
Yeah.
Obviously a few decades ago. But, you know, I was like suddenly hooked on reading. But then that his like voice was in my head, and then I had this like weird story in my head. So I just kind of like wrote it down on paper. I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun, storytelling. And so it just kind of went there. So I always knew it was in here. And then just kind of let it go. And then as I do product development, one of the things you do is you pitch a lot.
Okay.
And, you know, you have a new idea or concept for a new product, and you got to pitch it to the execs. and you got to set it up so they can pitch it to sales, and they got to set it up so they can pitch it to the customer, so somebody can buy it, so I can actually build a product. But that's storytelling as well. That's, you're creating a story to sell to somebody, and so I'd craft these reports all the time, and in that world, I learned a lot about making things efficient, like my words, making them clear, precise, but also that I can get the point across quickly.
Yep.
I remember I worked at Sony for a small period, and I turned in this report to my director, and it was like 2 or 3 pages. He literally picked it up. He looked at it. He said, "Okay, that's great. Put it down. We'll use it, but you got to make it only 1 page." I'm like, "What? Are you kidding me?" He's like, "Go cut it down." I'm like, "But everything there is important." He's all, "No, it's important to you. If I have a question, I can ask you. Now you make it easy for me to read, because I read these all day long." So I went back, learned how to craft something down, say the same thing, but just craft it. And then, Twitter came along, and it really forced you how to craft a thought carefully. And if you spend a lot of time doing it, it was really a skill. And then now in the plays, I have a specific word count. And so lots of times if I get over that word count for any particular script, I'm cutting, and I'm figuring out, okay, I wrote it in 9 words. I could say the same thing with 7. Now this line, this line, this line. So it's kind of all evolved that way.
All right. Well, first of all, it's a good thing it was Clancy, because like if you had found like that one-off author who's only written one thing, you might have not strung together all that stuff.
Right.
Are you still a reader now? Like, have you?
Yes.
Okay. So basically from that moment on.
Yeah, no, from that moment on, I'm kind of a binge reader. It's like I won't read for like 3 or 4 months, and the next thing you know, it's like I knock out like 7 books in a month.
Okay.
And then, I might pause because, I've got a kid on the spectrum. I've got 2 daughters. I had to take care of my mom for a long time. And so,
and you've got to write.
Yeah, you got to write.
Yeah.
But then seriously, you got to write, and you got to run my business because I do everything by myself. And so that just, there's so much time, and there's family time. And so, there isn't much time for reading in one sense, but I can't get better at my craft of writing if I don't read. So I think, the Stephen King on the back, it was so funny. It was on the back of his audiobook. It said, if you don't have the time to read, you don't have the time to write. And I always found that so ironically funny. I'm like, only Stephen King would slap someone in the face going, "You're listening to an audiobook, and I'm telling you, if you don't have time to read, you don't have time to write."
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's subtle, and I'm not saying audiobooks are wrong or bad. I listen to audiobooks, and they have their place. But I think seeing the written word is different than hearing the written word. And it's completely different, because you have actors, they're saying the lines a certain way, and when you're reading it, your voice is saying it a different way. So it's really 2 different avenues into your head.
I would argue that our generation's, anyone who was probably 16 or older in 2001 that read Tolkien has a Gandalf in their head that may or may not be related. It's not Ian McKellen. Whereas everybody after those movies, even if you read the book, you cannot read those descriptions and not see Ian McKellen now, right? And so for us, I mean, this is the thing. I go back to this all the time, and I wish this is one of those time machine moments. I think I would love to know. I worked in a gaming store when I was like 14, and we'd play Magic the Gathering. It's the mid to late 90s. And occasionally you would get on these like, well, if they made a live action Lord of the Rings, who would play what? And we would talk about this for hours. And this is this is not long before, but it's, 4 or 5 years before the first movie's even cast. And I would just love to know who we said I'd love to go back and know who we were arguing in favor of X, Y, and Z. Right. And, we're not worldly. It's a gaming store, so maybe there's some kids in 5th grade, and maybe there's some people from college or some recent college graduates. But you can fit us all under a decade, and it's slightly cross-generational, but not much. So like going back, like who would we have argued for? And I would argue every single one of our things was based on how we interpreted the novel, not, well, it's Ian McKellen, right? Like it's just, we don't think about it that way. And so you're right. Like there is in your mind's eye, and while I kind of agree, I agree in principle with, you need to see the written word to write the written word. I'm a podcaster, but the more I produce this show and others, the less time I have for consuming podcasts. And the more I write, the less time I have to read, because whereas if you and I were like, I don't know, mechanics or, bakers, we could put an audiobook on, we could put a movie on in the background, we could listen to music, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm going to edit this podcast, I can't read and edit this I can't listen to something and edit it. If you and I are going to write, we can't listen to an audiobook and write. And so it's this very weird thing where I think your, I guess, fits and spurts of reading is more natural than mine, because I just force myself to read a few pages every day, even if I don't have the time.
Oh, I do too. I fall asleep reading almost every night.
But on a whole, I can get through, I still get through more books than the average person, I think. But there are times when it's like, oh no, I'm not far behind, so I have an hour more to read or whatever. But oh my God, the amount of, if you are a creator, the amount of time you have to indulge in consuming things is much less than if you're just a straight, and I don't think a lot of creatives, I think we do a disservice to ourselves for not like letting other people know, like, it's okay that you aren't reading or listening to as much music, but you're creating your own thing, so it's fine.
Right.
Like it's okay.
But I think it's a balance too, because I think there's buckets in your head. It's like, I feel like when my reading bucket gets depleted, I got to fill it up.
Okay.
And I think that's why I binge it. And again, nothing against audiobooks at all. I mean, we have a place in Oregon, which is about a 12-hour drive, and I almost every time I consume at least one audiobook going up, one audiobook coming back. And, I remember going through the Alex Cross series, just, one after another, just because it was easy. It was quick. I love the story. I mean, I love binging stuff on Netflix or something because I love just watching the stories.
Yep.
I love the cinematography of how they're being produced. And for me, it's all about the story. I just love the engagement of the story. And so you got to consume it whatever way you can. Yeah. And audiobooks are so big because, people have a difficult time as they get older, their eyes start bugging out. So screens become more challenging. I can't read on an actual physical book anymore because of my eyes. So I have to do screens so I can adjust the fonts.
Okay.
And I'm almost always reading with a dark background. It's just easier on my eyes.
Yep.
But, that's what the screens allow you to do. It gives you that flexibility. Books, you can actually print large print, and there's people who buy large print books, but that's really what, your Kindle does for you. It allows you to go large print if you need to.
Yes.
And then you go and it's funny. I'll do, let's say, a cold reading with high schoolers, and they're literally all of them are on their phone. They're like reading it along. And I look at their phone and it's like at a font 4. It's ridiculous how tiny it is. And they're like, brr, 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 brr. And I'm like, dude, your eyes are going to be burned by the time you're like 20, man.
So hold on. That's just the first read through, right? But at some point they move to paper so they can write notes, correct? Or is that just a generational thing and that's not the way they do it?
Part of it's generational. I have literally I've done a cold reading with a group, let's say 10, they were all high schoolers, and printed them out, and they're like, oh no, I got it on my phone, don't worry about it. I'm like, but it's right.
But how do they make notes? How do they
just say stuff. I'm the one taking notes.
Okay.
If it's a cold reading on one of my plays,
okay.
Sorry, I should have clarified.
No.
This would be something I wrote, and then I want them to read it.
Yeah, okay.
I will be listening. I'm like taking notes.
But if they're going to perform it,
right,
then they take. I've
never seen them not do it with paper when a performance, but I've seen it plenty of times when they're just like, when I say like cold reading, they're just reading for the first time. It's on their phone. It's just for them quicker, easier.
My wife has been working on a novel for the better part of, longer than I've known her. And she's been trying to finish it up. And she's like, "You've edited a novel before." I'm like, "Yeah, I have." She's like, "Well, you can edit this." I was like, "Well, we'll have to print it out." She goes, "Why?" I'm like, I know I can make notes. I know I can, but as an editor, and I get this, I know I get this from my mother, but as an editor, I want the paper. Like the first novel I edited, which is still unpublished, and I'm sure we'll go through another revision with my friend who wrote it. We both printed it out. We were so excited he finished a novel, like
cool
a manuscript.
It's holding a manuscript.
Yeah, it was just the coolest thing, and editing it felt better. I mean, we have the digital thing, but like I can still go through because I still have it and just be like, yeah, this is where I made, whatever. And I know it's probably not the easiest, and I know it's not the most But
see, you have a different mind than your wife, than I do, and that's the thing you get. Like when I was doing for Hatchet, which is the book that's out now, when I was doing the beta reads, and just to clarify, in case you guys don't know, there's beta, which they read it. It's not really edited very well, but the story is there. Yep. I cleaned it up pretty good. You're going to catch things, but that's the point of a beta read.
Yeah.
But the bigger picture of a beta read is kind of like 30,000 foot view looking down, saying, okay, I know you said this, but you killed this guy off in chapter 7 and he came back in chapter 14.
Yep.
Catch blatant things like that. Or the story arcs don't make sense, or, wow, you really, I don't think that person would have done that. So it's just logic.
Yep.
That's what I call story logic. But I'd say I sent out 30 different copies. At least 3 of them are like, I can't do this unless it's printed. And I'm like, totally cool. You're spending 2 weeks of your time going through this stuff for me. Here's 500 pages. Boom.
Yeah.
I print them out and I ship them off and I give them a return envelope to send back. And it's kind of cool because then I'm flipping page to page and they're writing it down. And, but people have different mindsets of how they look at it.
Yep.
Other people are like, just digital. Some are paper. I'm like, okay, hey, I will work with whatever avenue works for you.
Yeah.
So, so it's not, paper isn't wrong, but paper for some people are just completely easier.
Yeah. You
can mentally wrap yourself around it a lot better. So I didn't want to, box myself in by saying, oh, nope, sorry, I'm not going to, I'm not going to spend the $18 in total, to do this.
So are there, obviously you've done plays and obviously now a novel. Are there other forms or even mediums that you want to tackle upcoming?
Well, it's actually interesting you say this, and I'm going to be very careful how I say this. Music, not me. I don't have a lick of like musical ability.
Okay.
But there's 2 things that I really want to do. One is a musical.
Okay.
I get a lot of teachers that ask for musicals with my plays. So crafting one of my plays in Hamlet and turning it into a musical, and already have kind of the concept and everything. And I can write the lyrics, but it's so hard for me mentally to sing a tune with words.
Okay.
And so it's just a gap that my brain has, but I'm aware of it. So I've started working on workarounds. Part of it is my son. He's on the spectrum, but he's amazing at guitar. He's got gift of music.
Okay.
And he's a writer too. So when I say a writer, he loves Dr. Seuss. He loves Disney. So he's written 5 children's books that are very Dr. Seuss-ish. We went to Autism Fair 3 weeks ago, and he brought 60 of his hardback books. And I'm like, okay, if we just break even, I'm stoked because I fronted all the money for it. And next thing you know, because he's not your conventional salesman, he's just out there.
Okay.
And if people don't like, people are like, no, I don't think I'll buy it. He literally like looks in his face. They're like, dang it. And he's yelling, not yelling at them, but just like yelling out.
Yeah.
It's not something you would normally do as a salesperson, but people just dug him and they loved him. And next thing you know, like in 2.5 hours, he sold everything.
Nice.
I'm like, holy cow. Well, we got to do this more often. But he also has musical abilities, and we've written a couple songs together. They're just fun songs. One's called the Alligator Song. But he knows how to carry the tune. He knows how to end it. He can play the guitar with it. I can help him with the words. And so together we do it pretty good. So I'm kind of in the process of like somewhere down the road to learn how to craft that so I can put it out there on like iTunes or Spotify or wherever those avenues are. I still got to research it all.
Yeah.
But yeah, as another medium,
Yep.
yeah, that's another one there.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of fun.
I mean,
that's a long-winded answer.
There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot though. I mean, as a script writer, even for plays like, I mean, movies, television pilots. I mean, I guess at this point, I'm saying these things, but having just known you for this conversation, it feels like, well, if it pops in your head, you're gonna do it. It doesn't really matter.
I have a friend. She produces movies. She's done a few movies up in Seattle, and all of them are independent. And it was funny. She's like, "Congratulations on the book." And I wrote back to her. I'm like, "It would make a great movie." Just saying, And she's like, "Well, I need a screenwriter." I'm like, "I can write." Just.
I mean, I guess that it does beg a different question, which is, you've been adapting others. Like, do you think you'd be good at adapting your own work? Because that's a different.
I'll be honest with you. I've thought about that many times, and as much as I'd want to give it a go, I want to be I've always, so in product development, part of the reason I was really good at product development is I would listen to people and I would hear ideas. And I'm a very firm believer that, if I have a concept of an idea, I will tell so many people. I will tell little kids, and kids will think of things that you never thought about. And I'm like, ooh, that's good. Or tell a homeless person. I don't care who, really, because guess what? They're going to say ideas about it. They might say 10 different ideas. And guess what? Hey, that piece right there, that one piece is really cool. I'm going to take that little nugget and I'm going to put it in. And I'm always been very good at like this collaboration process. And I believe in giving credit to anybody who gets in the process.
Yeah.
And that's honestly probably been the hardest thing about novel writing, is you're living in a silo a lot of the time.
You're on your own. Yeah.
It's hard.
Well, I mean, the editing process itself, and when you get your beta readers, that's a bit of collaboration. But until then, from the first word to the last word on that initial manuscript, yeah, you're alone.
Well, you can be, or you can. A lot of people are just afraid to let their work out.
Okay.
And I've learned, doing products. I mean, I've had products that were just crap. And when I worked at Slime, there was a very blunt environment. And if something sucked, the boss came down and said, "God, this sucks." But if something was great, he's like, "God, that was awesome." You got both sides of it and you weren't punished either way.
Okay.
So you felt free
to try
this,
things,
knowing. And when you start studying innovation and really start studying creativity, one of the things they teach you is fail fast, fail often.
Okay.
So you have an idea for something, create it. I don't care if it's a sketch on a paper. I don't care if it's a little paper mache, 3D model, whatever. Create it and then show it to people. And people are going to be like, "That's great, but where do I put my coffee?" Or, "That's great, what about this?" And, "Oh, that's good. I'll tweak that in. Oh, I got to do that." Okay. But the more times you iterate that, the more successful that product is going to be in the end. Now, in writing a play, I can, I've done so many of them now, I can craft a lot of it in my head. And I can see the kids, I can hear the voices, I say it, act it out loud. In the novel, I have a couple close friends that I'm like, "Hey, here's the concept of the story." Because I start from the very beginning. "Here's the concept. What do you think?" And they'll be like, "Ooh, what if it was this?" I'm like, "Oh, that's great." And, I'll start tweaking the story from the very beginning, because the problem of writing the first word, writing the last word, all in a silo, is if your story is going sideways on chapter 3 and
You
you
don't
write
know
30
until
chapters.
you're done. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the same thing as like creating a product and then putting it to market and it never sells. And you're like, why? Well, because you spelled the name backwards. It's like, oh, I should have seen that from the beginning.
Yeah.
But these things, they happen. But if you can get a couple, 2 or 3 people that are confident that
Yeah.
you're not worried about sharing your story, and I get people are scared and worried about sharing a concept, but in the flip side, if you've thought of the idea, it's been thought of by 100 other people already ahead of you.
Yep.
I remember I invented a product. It was called Scuff Away Painter. And it was basically a paint touch-up. I came home one day and there were scuffs on the back wall. My wife's like, it'd be a lot easier if there was just some little like tube I can just paint it. I'm like, well, every wall is a different color. She's like, well, why don't you make the tubes with the color? I'm like, oh. And so I took like a shoe shine bottle and then I took whatever gallon paint, I put it in with a little sponge. Like, this works perfect. It was a great concept. I paid for tooling, got it all done, brought it to market. And we called it Scuff Away Painter. But our practice, when we put it in the market, we just called it Paint Touch Up. The Paint Touch Up sold like crazy. And then I got into this branding, calling it Paint Scuff Away. And it was so funny because it completely crashed because people were like, what's Scuff Away?
Okay.
But Paint Touch Up, people knew. And, but that's just, I don't even know why I tangent into this story, but it's the, iteration of products as they go through. And, I'm really spinning off. I'm not sure why.
No. I mean, I see how it connects though, because you do need, you got stuck on the name.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody along the way could have been like, no, just keep it as it is. It's selling well. Why would you change the name? But
yeah, I was so far in the forest. I just was like, hey, this actually, it's a perfect name. And the logic here was the funny, we talk about going back and looking at business cases. It was a great name. We had literally a great, cool little logo that we created. But the problem was I was so far in the forest that it didn't educate the consumer.
Yep.
And the consumers has that much time. So I had to sell them like that. If I didn't, they were gone. Now, Paint Touch Up, it's generic. I cannot brand Paint Touch Up.
Yeah.
I cannot trademark, but I can Scuff Away Painter. So I was all hooked up on branding and owning that intellectual property, as opposed to, I forgot how it sells. And when I made that jump, I fell on my face and it died. But I learned.
See, I like that, and I think it's probably better for you, and it's probably because you're a writer. I think writers, creatives on a whole have failed a lot more than most people but usually in the privacy of our own home. How many drafts have we started and just not, people who aren't creative probably think, well, I mean, I'm sure there's something good in that draft. Why don't you just keep working on it? And like you and I will be like, well, that's 500 words I'm not getting back. I'm just going to start over because it's better to start over. But we have to be willing, but that's admitting failure on that draft or whatever it is. And failure's not bad. Again, to your point, it's not a bad thing. You get to learn more from it. But the amount of just on drafts alone, whether it's a canvas or the written word or the printed page or a typewriter or a screen, like we've gone through and we've started over again. Because why not? And all of our things the next time are better for it. But you seem to be I kind of like your philosophy of just like, when it comes, it comes. And I've kind of been trying to do that myself, but I find myself comfortable, right? And I know I've look, having a child has changed my processes in a way that's made me uncomfortable again, which is good.
Level, yeah.
I think that like getting uncomfortable is important because being comfortable is the easiest way to get stuck in a rut. And I don't know that we all want to do that. But you have more novels in the can then, and obviously you're going to keep doing plays. Is this just, more and more until you get the musical going and then?
No. Like right now, the plays are on hiatus. I mean, granted, I launched so far. I launched 5 plays this year already.
Yeah, as we're recording, that's one a month.
That's true. That's just sorry, that's right. Yeah, but for the next, and when we're recording, I haven't launched my novel yet, but I'm spending the next, honestly, 2 to 3 months just working on marketing and launching, and I'm writing. I got commissioned to write one other play, so I'm going to be doing that in the middle of it. But it's just I want to focus.
Okay.
And if to do a good job, you do need to focus. I can't just, and I have my family. I've got to be, there's a reason, I'm at 5 a.m. recording this because, I don't want to compromise my family.
Yeah.
And because they feel it too. So it's definitely a balance, like I said, earlier, this is kind of my hobby. It's my job, but it's my hobby too. So, I don't, my family is my number one thing. And so it's a balance. But then again, those buckets, when one bucket gets empty, I got to go try to fill it.
Yep. And this isn't balance that happens overnight. Like, this is 20 years of figuring it out. And when
I figure it out, I'll tell you.
Oh, so you're still working. Yeah.
We're always learning.
There are 3 things that stick out to me from this conversation, and I'm discounting the fact that we hit it off and could have recorded for another hour or 2. The first is that we both love writing, and that's something that we both came to at different times and in different ways, but we are here to be examples of the idea that your path to loving writing doesn't have to be constant or even linear. You arrive at loving writing when you arrive, and you are welcome if that happens at 16 or 62. The second is that getting comfortable is a good way to get stuck in a rut, which is why the third thing, we're always learning, is so important, because it means that we always have new things that can jolt us out of said rut. And that makes me think that wonder is the key to open the door of learning. It's not complicated. You just have to be curious and actually do something about it. Pick up a book, talk to an expert, watch a documentary, go to a play, listen to something, maybe like a podcast. All of these are ways to keep learning. Always keep learning. And if you learned something from this episode, all the better. Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files episode 160. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact us in the show notes. The Night She Said Hatchet can be found on Brendan's website, bpkelso.com, and his library of melodramatic scripts for kids can be found at playingwithplays.com. The music for this episode was provided by Henno Heitur. Email and comments can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Brendan, do you have one final question for me?
Yeah, what's your favorite baseball team?
Baltimore Orioles.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I get that. Yeah. Right now.
Especially this year, man. You guys are tearing it up.
I know. So, yeah, I get it. I get it from my father. They have, to give you my age, they have won a championship in my lifetime, but I wasn't really aware of it. Yeah, so that's...
Who's the ball?
So this is the thing, right? That ball... So you can't see all of the stuff, but the ball that is visible in my background, that is a baseball that was signed. I got it signed, so I was there. I don't have a certificate of authenticity. It's not one of those. I just have a good story with that one. So I went to school north of Scranton, and my buddy and I would kind of sometimes go to the Scranton, at the time, what would have been the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Red Barons, which was at the time the affiliate of the Phillies. That's now the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Yankees because affiliations changed. But at the time, you were still allowed in early enough to watch batting practice.
Right. I remember that.
And I think it would have been Lackawanna County Stadium, which is what it was called at the time, had AstroTurf. Like, even into the 2000s, like just good old-fashioned, you're playing on carpet on top of concrete, AstroTurf. So if you were at batting practice, you know, like a hard ball down the left field or right field line could easily bounce into the stands. Like, none of this stuff is hard to do if it gets out of the cage, if you're familiar with batting practice. So my buddy and I we each got a ball. And to put some time into this is the Philadelphia Phillies farm system in 2003 or 4, something like that. So that ball was personally signed for me by Chase Utley.
Nice.
When he was being held down by, I think, Placido Polanco, who was at second. And I was like, but this guy that we watch on occasion, because we weren't going to every game, but this guy is hitting doubles. He's like just a doubles machine, and he gobbles up everything at second. I'm like, why is this guy down here? Right? Like, now, granted, he went on to win some championships with Philly, and obviously he had a curse on live television that will live in infamy, and then he went to the Dodgers and became infamous in a whole different way. But I have this ball that, like, I got from batting practice, and I got to hand it to him, and he signed it, and now I've got a story. And even though I'm an Orioles fan, I'm still generally a baseball fan. And so it's kind of like, wow, like, he's one of those guys that I could cheer for because he played it. I think he played it the right way. He always went 110%. You know, it's one of those, you know, just kind of things, I guess. Are you a baseball guy?
Oh, I'm a big baseball fan.
So what's your team?
Giants.
Okay.
Yeah. I grew up in the Bay Area. And the cool part about the Bay Area is you have two teams that are
you had
6 mark.
Sorry.
6.
Yeah.
No. There's actually the story. I'm leading to that story. We were like literally 6-10 miles apart. But I grew up on the East Bay. So if you look at the Bay Area, there's a giant body of water there.
Yep.
And on the west side is where the Giants played, and on the east side is where the Oakland A's play. I want to emphasize the word Oakland there. Yep. And so I lived right next to a BART station, which is basically just a train that would transfer, goes all around the Bay Area. And we would ride our bike to it, hop on, and it drops you off at the Coliseum, and you just walk in, watch a game, then just take BART back. It was great. So I saw a lot of Oakland A's. I mean, I grew up watching McGuire and Canseco and Henderson. And
also, for the record, also on AstroTurf. Like, that was another one of
No, I don't think they had AstroTurf.
I thought the Coliseum had AstroTurf for some reason.
Maybe at one time, but I don't think they did. But still, for some reason, my dad was always a Giants fan, so I actually just became a Giants fan.
Okay.
But I can only see them once in a while. I grew up loving Willie McCovey. He was like my hero. And then jump forward 30 plus years, they're taking the A's out of Oakland last year. And I was like, oh, wow, it was kind of emotional because even though I'm not an A's fan, I definitely love them. I went to tons of games, but, I hadn't been to a game in years. And part of it is that ballpark is it's just a concrete it's not great.
Yeah.
Especially when you go to like Giants games over at Oracle Park, and that ballpark is gorgeous.
Yeah, the Coliseum. I mean, look, I know they're leaving because of the Coliseum, and there are obviously politics involved in building stadiums, but that stadium is from an era before you and me, actually.
Yeah.
Like that's the era, and so that the fact that it wasn't updated. Like, I love Camden Yards, but people are, and while I know it's the stadium that changed baseball, people call it old. Now,
I know.
You know, and so the
Coliseum,
which is well before that, it's just like, all right, it was time, right? And I get it, but
still, I went to the. My wife got me tickets to go to the last game at the Coliseum.
Okay,
and that was like super cool, and it was emotional. I caught myself crying there. Because there was just so many memories, and so many things that weren't going to happen anymore, and I got to be in this place.
So,
and next thing you know, there was a foul ball, and I went with my buddy, and he like reached down, grabbed it, and so I've got a ball from that game.
So let me ask you this: you did go to some Giants games back in the day?
Candlestick, yeah.
Yep. So what do you remember from that? And I only ask because like my first games were at Memorial Stadium; they weren't at Camden Yards, and so I still remember sitting in the bleachers in right field, or like sitting up in certain, like I still remember certain things from Memorial Stadium, even though it's gone, that like you're going to now sadly remember of the Coliseum, but obviously Candlestick, it needed to go at some point, but that's you now have, I think you kind of know a little bit about what you're going to feel for the Coliseum because you lived through it with Candlestick, right?
Yeah. The Candlestick, I mean, but I think the difference is the Giants stayed and the A's are gone.
Okay.
I mean, they went to Sacramento, which is
for now.
40, 60 miles.
For now.
Yeah, for now.
Know as we record this, there's still a 50-50 chance they don't end up in Vegas. Like who knows?
No, absolutely. I'm still hoping not, because Vegas, if you really think of the logic and you look at what's happened with the Raiders, it's like Vegas is a great place to go for a weekend. It's perfect for football, really, because you can just go party. But the problem is if you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, all your Minnesota friends all get to go to Vegas at the same time. Next thing you know, your home stadium is more purple than it is black. And so you start becoming.
You don't have to explain this to me. You know how many when the Orioles are bad, and even when the Orioles are good, do you know how many Boston and Yankee fans come down the train and fill up Camden Yards?
We get Dodger fans. They're the worst.
You and I, that's a different podcast, because I would argue that when the Phillies fans come down, when the new Yankees fans come down, Boston, we'll have to see if the Dodgers fans are truly the worst.
I don't argue. California is a little more laid back in that sense. East Coasters can be a little more blunt,
abrasive.
Abrasive. Thank you. But it's funny. It's like, if you go into San Francisco, and into that enemy territory as a Dodger fan, we're a lot more open to it. But if you go San Francisco into the Dodgers, there's a little more, I feel a little more hatred there.
Animosity, or is animosity too nice a word for it?
It may be. I mean, but then again, I grew up, my two favorite teams are the Giants and whoever's playing the Dodgers. So
okay, that's
just the way I grew up. And
I have no problem with that. I can say that for me it's the Orioles and whoever's playing the Yankees, but at the same time, I am so anti-Yankee that when I was really big into fantasy baseball, and I was good enough
to draft a Yankee player?
I would never put a Yankee on my team. Never. I've won championships by passing on Yankees. I just wouldn't do it, right? And at the time when I was still playing,
validates your logic.
It's one of those things where at the time, Rivera would have been good for 40 saves, and Jeter was going to hit 295, and there are guys you could have counted on for numbers, and I was like, no, I cannot put a Yankee, because I want to be able to root for
and enjoy it
anybody on my fantasy team, and even if it's a Red Sox, like I guess it's okay if they get a hit against the Orioles as long as he doesn't score or whatever, but I can't deal with it being a Yankee, so I just couldn't. there are
the
lines.
worst is when your closer's going against your team, and you're like, all right, do I want him to get a blown save so I get the win? Do I want him to not so I get the points? Yeah,
Well,
I
that's
played
the funny
fantasy.
part about my fantasy is I spent a lot of time drafting players from your neck of the woods, from the NL West, because it was just, and that's, look, baseball's the great like story thing for I still remember working a retail job, so I wasn't able to watch Orioles games because I was working like 5 to 10, but I'd be able to watch all the West Coast games with MLB TV because I've had that for a long time. And I remember watching like Max Scherzer start his career with 9 pitches and 3 strikeouts in relief, right? Like it's just, and I will never forget that.
Right.
It's just, and now he's getting paid by like 17 teams to not pitch at all.
He is.
Baseball's a funny game,
I always feel bad for East Coasters that are baseball fan, because it's like on the West Coast, I can watch all the games. We stay up late till 10 to watch all the games, but it's on the East Coast. It's like if your team's back east, it's 1 a.m. and your team's still playing.
Yeah. No, especially.
I mean,
that's the thing.
Brutal.
When Orioles go out to Anaheim or Oakland, or like when Interleague came out, LA or San Francisco. And it's one of those things where you're just hoping that the game doesn't go to extras.
Right. Exactly.
Like a game that ends at 1 o'clock, 12:30. Okay, fine. But like a game that goes into extras in Seattle. Oh, come on. Like, it's just like, it's one of those things where sometimes you wake up and the game's over and you're like, who won?
Yeah. It was, what is it? When I used to do fantasy, when we first started out, we did points, and then I moved to Roto years later. But when we do points, and if I was ever traveling for work on the East Coast, I'd like fall asleep. I'm like, but then I get the paper in the morning. Okay, I'll just see what the points were for the day. I'm like, what do you mean the box score's not finished?
Yeah.
Because some of them had box scores that just weren't done in the newspaper because the games
went too long.
Print time.
Yeah.
Like, are you?
Yeah, that's you and I as sports people. That's a different conversation. That's the one thing where it's like I'm a big college football guy, so like the idea of like a 9 a.m. kickoff, like a breakfast kickoff, that seems amazing. That's a different podcast.
It is kind of cool because here it's like baseball games, they'll start at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And they'll run 10 a.m. If you get a good Saturday, you'll run 10 a.m. to like 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And, I mainly follow the Giants, but still, there's scores going on, especially when I was playing fantasy baseball. It's like I was watching every game.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know how that is. So yeah, it was definitely a different thing, but yeah, it's so funny. I love baseball.